I thought we had more time. But he came back 5 hours early. I hadn't even unbuckled my seatbelt when I saw his silhouette in the window. My breath caught in my throat. He knew. I could feel it. But he didn't storm outside, didn't call my name. He just stood there, still as a shadow, watching. My hands trembled as I killed the engine. My mind raced. Why is he home so soon? He was supposed to be at that late meeting, he never canceled last minute. I glanced at my phone. No messages. No missed calls. Just silence. The kind that pulls the ground from under your feet. I yanked down the visor, checking my reflection. My lipstick was fine, but I wiped it off anyway. My hands smelled like him, cologne lingering from when he grabbed my wrist in the car. My stomach twisted. I tossed the gum out the window. Shook out my hair. Act normal. Don't panic. But my pulse was slamming against my ribs as I stepped out, each click of my heels against the pavement feeling too loud. Inside, the house was silent. No TV. No music. Just the low hum of the refrigerator. He was in the living room, sitting in his usual chair, back to the door. The dim glow from the lamp cast his face in sharp relief. He was staring at the floor, fingers laced together, unmoving. I swallowed hard. Hey, you're home early. My voice sounded off, too high, too casual. He didn't look up immediately. Just a slow inhale, the kind that made my nerves tighten. Then he turned, eyes locking onto mine. Pulled. Unreadable. We need to talk. And that's when I knew, whatever was coming next was going to change everything. It didn't happen overnight. It was slow, like a candle burning down to its wick, like the quiet loss of warmth in a room. He was still there, sitting across from me at dinner, sleeping beside me at night, but it felt different. Conversations shrank to schedules, meetings, work. Touches became rare, brief, mechanical. His lips pressed to my forehead felt more like habit than affection. I told myself it was just a phase. That we were both busy. That the distance wasn't real. But deep down I knew better. Then one evening he walked through the door with someone else. His old friend, back in town after years away. Confident, effortlessly charming, with the kind of easy presence that pulled people in. When our eyes met, something in my chest tightened. It was nothing. Just a glance. Just curiosity. But later that night I laughed at one of his jokes. Really laughed like I hadn't in months. And in that moment I felt something I didn't realize I had lost. Something dangerous. Something I wasn't supposed to crave. It started as harmless moments. Quick glances across the room, brief conversations that stretched just a little too long, the way his hand would graze mine when passing a drink. I told myself it was nothing. But then came the night we ended up in the elevator together, just the two of us. The doors slid shut, sealing us in a quiet, enclosed space, the air thick with something unspoken. Neither of us moved. My pulse pounded. His breath was steady but deep, controlled, deliberate. Seconds stretched, too heavy, too charged. Then the elevator jolted, sudden, sharp, sending me stumbling forward. His hands caught my waist, steadying me, but I was already too close. My chest pressed against his, our faces inches apart. His fingers tightened, his gaze locked onto mine, dark, unreadable. My breath hitched. I knew I should step back, but I didn't. His lips parted slightly, and for a split second the world stopped. Then, the chime of the elevator. The doors slid open. Someone stepped inside. I tore away, pulse hammering, heart slamming against my ribs. I couldn't look at him. I didn't have to. I already knew we had crossed a line. I walked through the front door, forcing my breathing to steady, my hands gripping my bag too tightly. The house smelled like fresh coffee, his jacket was draped over the chair. Everything was exactly as it should be, except for me. I moved through the motions, setting my keys down, checking my phone like nothing had happened. But my heart was still racing. My skin still burned where his hands had steadied me. I told myself it was a mistake, just a moment of lost balance, nothing more. It had to be. I had a life, a routine, a future. This was nothing but a dangerous impulse, and I could push it away. Then my phone vibrated. I shouldn't have looked. But I did. I know what you're feeling. And you know I'm right. My breath hitched. My fingers curled around the phone. He knew. He had seen it in my eyes, felt it in the way I didn't pull away. He wasn't going to let me forget. I deleted the message, but it didn't matter. The words weren't just on the screen, they were already in my head. And I had no idea how much they would change everything. I made a decision. I had to fix this before it went too far. Whatever had ignited inside me had to be extinguished. My life wasn't broken. I was just letting my mind wander where it shouldn't. That night when my partner walked in, he seemed lighter, almost like the man I used to know. He smiled, kissed my temple, and casually said, "Let's do something different tonight. Just us." I agreed too quickly, desperate to drown out the thoughts that had taken root. He cooked something simple but thoughtful. We opened a bottle of wine. The air felt warm, comfortable, safe. Then he took my hand, pulling me toward him, swaying to music only he could hear. His hands were steady, his movements familiar, and when he leaned in, his lips brushing mine, I forced myself to let it happen. But as he kissed me, as his fingers laced through my hair, I felt nothing. No spark. No fire. Just a hollow, aching silence inside me. And for the first time I realized, something in me had already shifted. And there was no undoing it. I told myself it wouldn't happen again. But it did. And then again. It wasn't accidental anymore. The stolen glances turned into planned moments. The casual conversations stretched too long. The space between us kept getting smaller. Every time I told myself to stop, something inside me whispered, "Just one more time." I knew the risk, but the danger only made it more intoxicating. The way he looked at me, like I was the only thing in the room, like I was something to be unraveled, was something I hadn't felt in years. It was a game and I was playing it willingly. The messages were short, subtle, but every word carried weight. A touch lingering a second too long. A whisper in passing. The thrill of knowing something no one else did. I convinced myself I was still in control. Then one afternoon as I walked through a crowded cafe, I felt it, eyes on me. Not his. Someone else's. A pause too long. A gaze that didn't shift away. My stomach twisted. It was just my imagination. It had to be. Because if it wasn't, then the game I thought I was playing might not be a game at all. I felt it before I saw it. Something shifting, a change in the air. My partner's colleague had always been polite, almost forgettable, just another presence in the background. But lately his eyes lingered too long, his expressions held something I couldn't quite place. At first I told myself I was imagining it. But then at a dinner party as I poured a glass of wine, I caught him watching me, his gaze sharp, calculating. I forced a smile, turned away, pretended not to notice. Later, as I passed him in the hallway, he stopped just long enough to murmur, "You think no one notices?" My body stiffened. I felt the blood drain from my face. I let out a small laugh, too light, too forced. "I don't know what you're talking about." He didn't argue. He just held my gaze for a second longer, then walked away. My heart pounded. He didn't accuse me. He didn't have to. The way he said it, the way he looked at me, I knew. He saw something. And if he saw it, how much longer until my partner did? The day had been normal. Almost too normal. I had spent hours in the kitchen, testing out a new dessert for the New Year's celebration. Something rich, decadent, something I wanted to perfect. When my husband's best friend stopped by to drop something off, I cut him a slice. He took one bite, closed his eyes, and groaned in approval. "This is dangerous," he joked, finishing the piece too quickly. I laughed, but my mind was elsewhere, already racing toward the night ahead. Later, I sat with my son, playing our usual board game, losing myself in the rhythm of competition. 10 rounds, 10 wins. He groaned every time I outmaneuvered him, laughing as he plotted his next move. I forced myself to stay present, to soak in the moment. But when he finally went to bed, reality came crashing back. The text came just after midnight. "Come outside." I knew I shouldn't. But I did. The car was warm, headlights off, streetlights casting long shadows. His fingers brushed my cheek, pushing a strand of hair back. My breath caught. His lips met mine. Then, loud, sharp, a knock on the window. My stomach dropped. I turned, heart pounding. And there he was. My partner. Standing in the cold, watching everything. The drive home was silent, but the sound of my heartbeat pounded in my ears. He didn't follow me inside right away. I stood in the dimly lit kitchen, gripping the counter, forcing myself to breathe. When the door finally clicked shut behind him, the air in the room turned suffocating. I turned to speak, to explain, to say anything, but the look on his face stopped me cold. He wasn't angry. He wasn't shouting. That would have been easier. Instead, his expression was calm, detached. He sat down at the table, ran a hand through his hair, exhaled slow. Then, without looking at me, he spoke. "I don't need to ask. I already know." His voice was steady, but there was something final in the way he said it, something that made my stomach twist. My throat tightened but no words came. He pushed back his chair, stood up, grabbed his keys. No accusations. No demands. Just a quiet, devastating truth settling between us. At the door he hesitated, glancing back one last time. Not with anger. Not with hate. Just disappointment. Then he walked out. And I knew I had lost him forever. The silence was unbearable. No footsteps in the hallway. No familiar sounds of the TV playing in the other room. Just emptiness. I sat on the couch, phone in hand, staring at the screen, waiting for something, anything. A message. A call. Second chance. But it never came. He was gone. And I knew he wouldn't be back. I dialed his number once, then twice. No answer. I typed out a message, deleted it, tried again. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but what could I even say? I'm sorry? Too late. I didn't mean for this to happen. Why? Please come home. He wouldn't. I thought about the other man, the one who had pulled me into this storm. But he was gone too. No messages. No late-night confessions. No promises. It had only ever been a moment for him. For me it had been everything. I set the phone down, staring at the dark screen, my reflection barely visible. I thought I could control this. Thought I could have both. In the end I lost everything.